freezing quickly. All right, thank you so much. So welcome to the SPIL Training and Technical Assistance Series. Again, my name is Sandra Brighton-Gross-Bitter. I'm with ILRU, and I will likely be joined by my colleague here in a bit, Paula McAway. We'll be doing a short presentation for you all on some of the SPIL basics and provide some additional resources, and then we're going to walk you through some of the sections of the SPIL. After we finish that, we are going to go into some questions and answer and peer sharing so we can provide any clarifications you all need as you embark onto this next exciting period of your state plan. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. You should have you should be seeing my screen. If you're not, there's a link in the chat where you can get access to the presentation. It'll be on our website as well. And it was in the email that was sent out as a reminder for today's session. So you should be able to see that. Go ahead and go to the next
And
slide.
Sandra, I am here if you need me.
Oh, hey, Paula.
I'll be invisible until you do.
Okay. That's a deal. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So like I said before, we are going to be going over the SPIL drafting and implementation roles, as well as what the input into the content of the SPIL should look like, and then going through a section by section review of the SPIL component. So, and then we'll go over some Q&A as we go along. So, hold on. Apologize. So this is pretty basic, but I think it's a key thing as we get into the fundamentals of our state plan. As a reminder, a lot of the regulations and well, the base language in the Rehab Act changed with regards to who develops the SPIL. And so just as a quick citation, as you get ready to start your planning, and as a reminder, is that the chairperson of the SILC and the directors of the SPIL, after receiving public input from individuals with disabilities and other stakeholders throughout the state. That is what will happen as you go into your SPIL planning process. So it again reiterates that the plan must be jointly developed by the SILC and the directors of the SILs after receiving that public input. Oops. So when we're talking about who signs and approves the SPIL, the chair of the SILC signs the SPIL, but it's acting on behalf of and at the direction of the SILC. So typically that means that the SILC gathers for an official meeting, they provide a vote and direct their chair to sign or not sign or whatever action it might be on the state plan. The director of the DSE also signs. They sign a different section of the state plan, but they are signing to implement the state plan. And then not less than 51% of the directors of the SILs in the state are also to sign the state plan. So when we talk about our state plan and we go through why is it important, who uses it, we really want to reiterate some key things. One being that this document is not just something you have to do every 3 years or a form you have to fill out. It really is a process in which ensures consumer control of the statewide funding for IL and the policies for IL. So one of the key core principles of independent living is making sure that people with disabilities are making decisions about themselves, right? And this includes making decisions about the funding, the program focus, where you're going to do outreach and expansion of the network. So that is reiterating consumer control at this level, at the statewide level, and will ensure that it can be implemented with the help of the Centers for Independent Living, the State Independent Living Council, and with funding from the federal government. So because people with disabilities run the SPIL and are really driving the silk, they are the decision makers. They are the SPIL decision makers and the authors of the state plan. So the DSC will follow what's in the state plan and will implement the sections that are designated for them. Typically, that includes funding for or administering the funds, but the real decision makers are the SPILs and the silk. So as you go and you approach this drafting process, it's a key thing to keep in mind as you embark upon this next stage. So as we look at this, we know that it's something that the state plan has to be done every 3 years, right? But when we look at it and we say, okay, well, why is it important? And it's not just something that we need to fill out because the federal regs say that we have to have something in place in order to release federal funds. It also is an opportunity to look at the statewide big picture, look at the trends and the needs of people with disabilities across the state, and really make sure that the state together, all the centers and the silk, are moving and agreeing to move in one general direction. Obviously, each SPIL is going to have its own plan to address their community needs. They're going to be very nimble and responsive to those community needs. But the state plan will look at how everything is going across those centers and look at what might be happening outside of the service areas of the centers if you don't have statewide coverage, or looking at census data, etc. And your SPIL will have its own mission, will have its own set of goals and its own set of objectives, and not one author, or say like one particular center or the silk or the DSE should be doing all the sections of the SPIL. It's something that is done as a collective, and it should be implemented that way. So now something that is looked at is how the SPIL and the work that is to be done, how are they being integrated into the work plans of the SPIL? How does that work? And that's a key thing to remember as we go through, as again, not saying that centers have to do each goal or each objective of the state plan, but really kind of how is the big picture being integrated into the work they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Oops, I'm sorry. Sorry. Did I skip a? Okay. So when we talk about a little bit more about why this SPIL is important, some of the key factors and the key decisions that will be made include which state agency will receive the federal funding for IL. So that really is your designated state entity. It will also ensure that there is an agreement across the network on the use of federal independent living funds with regards to Part B. It will ensure network agreement on the authorities of the silk and how the silk is funded. So sometimes we hear where there might be concerns about a silk going in a direction that might be different from the centers on a statewide level. Well, if you're looking at your state plan, it really should be it should be mapped out in your state plan what authorities the silk is using and how the silk is funded, as well as what it will be doing over that 3-year period. So look to that and really and dig deeper, but that's also a chance to make sure that the centers in your state are on board with the plans for the silk, and that there is an agreement before that work is started. So as we go, we know that there are sections of the state plan where it'll show a reflection of what the SPIL network looks like right there at that time, but it'll also provide some contingency planning on how it will react to funding changes. So if there are funding decreases, funding increases, if a center closes, if there are additional new funds that no one was really expecting, how will the network adapt to that and how will they distribute those funds? So those are the decisions that will need to be made as you go through and plan out your state plan. You're also going to be identifying what network gaps exist and what type of outreach plans will you be deploying to address them. Now, sometimes this is a hard conversation for a state because we want to be able to show that the network is doing a great job and that they're covering the state like they're supposed to be and that they're providing services to people with disabilities. But it's also really important to have some tough and honest conversations about where those gaps exist and how you're going to do some outreach to cover those gaps if that is possible. Oops, I'm sorry. And then you're also going to have network agreement on how the SPIL will be monitored and evaluated. So it shouldn't be a surprise to folks after the SPIL is signed on how you are going to work together to determine success, how the data from the centers will be communicated to the silk, and then also how the silk will use that data. This is a time to be to make sure that everyone is in agreement. There are no concerns or surprises, and you can do what you need to do after that plan is signed and in place. So oftentimes we'll hear of a concern that will be raised about how a silk is planning or is monitoring and evaluating their state plan. And so a lot of times what Paula will say and I will say is, well, what does your SPIL say? Because it really should be mapped out there. And if folks are reading and agreeing to the state plan, then that is where you need to address those concerns. So one of the other key areas that we wanted to highlight for you all is where and what public input should look like with regards to the development of the state plan. So the SILC is responsible for making sure that the public has an opportunity to have their say in the development of the state plan. And if you go back to that first slide, really shows that that's kind of your first step, is making sure that you are reaching out to the public and getting the feedback of people with disabilities on what this should look like before the SILC and the SIL start developing a plan on what they think it should look like. It should be inclusive of what the public thinks. And so when we talk about that, what does that look like? Is that if you're getting input into your state plan, it really should make sure you're capturing those opinions that might not be currently touched by the independent living plan. So you don't want to just go to consumers of centers or the centers themselves. You would also want to go beyond that to other stakeholders, other community members, folks that you should be coordinating with and maybe you aren't, and asking for their opinions about what this should look like. So there's a set of regulations about the requirements that folks must follow on the process of getting public input into the state plan. And they're listed out, and we have links here in it, but I'm going to give you an overview of what the language includes in the regulations and the assurances, or I'm sorry, the indicators, and then really what this means. So the SILC really needs to have a documented process of how they will develop the state plan and how they will receive input from the Centers for Independent Living and how you'll collect and analyze that information. So if you're looking at your SILC policies and procedures type of thing, you should really be seeing where it's laid out and that there's a SPIL development process, how that information is collected, how it's used, how input is gathered from the centers, and how input is gathered from people with disabilities. So this should be a plan. It should be a written process and plan before you get started on how you're going to make sure that you're adhering to those things. So when we're talking about public input, the regs pretty much say all meetings regarding state plan development and review are open to the public and provide advance notice of such meetings. So it seems pretty clear to me that the SILC must allow the public to participate, or that they would be open to the public, and that you have to provide advance notice of those meetings. And when you are having a SPIL meeting and you're asking for public input from the community, there's a certain set of rules that you have to follow. You have to follow the federal and any state rules to provide advance notice of those meetings. You need to make sure that the meeting locations where the public input is taken is accessible to all people with disabilities. And then there's a list of certain considerations to take into, or certain things to take into consideration, such as the proximity to public transportation, the physical accessibility, and then effective communications and accommodations, such as auxiliary aids and services, and pretty much anything you need to do to make sure that your meeting and your location is as accessible as possible for people with disabilities. That includes your digital materials. So making sure that your materials are 508 compliant, that they pass accessibility checks, and that you have the resources and the ability to make sure that if a request comes in, that you can get it translated to other languages or provide other spoken languages at a meeting. So as we go through, I'm going to go through a quick overview because I know that we want to get to some Q&A, but I want to go over a quick overview of the sections of the state plan, because in subsequent meetings, we will be doing a deeper dive into each one of these sections to figure out what should be included, some best practices and examples, and really help guide you through this process. So the first section of the state plan is your executive summary. It's really straightforward. It's a brief summary of the contents of the SPIL and an introduction to what the SPIL is. The section 1 is goals and objectives and activities. Here you will have your mission, your goals, your objectives, your activities, how the evaluation of the SPIL will be done, and where the financial resources will be in place for the SPIL and the network. Section 2 will identify the services that will be delivered across the network by the SPIL. This also will identify the outreach that will be completed in order to serve underserved or unserved populations, and will also show how the state plans to coordinate among other programs and organizations. Section 3 is a look at your network of centers. So it's going to show what your current centers are, what their funding sources look like, and who provides oversight. So that will be kind of like a snapshot in time, which that might change over your 3 years, but that really should be what is at the time of drafting. It also will go into further detail about your plans for expansion and potential adjustment to the network, how funds are going to be distributed, and what you're going to do if a SPIL needs to close for whatever reason. So a lot of that contingency planning is here in that section. In section 4, the designated state entity is the star of this section. It'll list the responsibilities of the DSC. It will list the way it will support the implementation of this plan through administration and staffing support, any type of oversight process, and the process for distribution and granting of the funds. The section 5 is a description of the statewide independent living council. So it'll show how the SILC is established and how you're ensuring autonomy through this process. You'll look at your SILC resource plan, and it will also describe how the SILC will be maintained over the course of the plan. This section is also where you'll describe what authorities you plan to exercise as a SILC. Section 6 is the legal basis and the certification section. This will identify your DSE. It'll identify the SILC, and it identifies all the SPILs that are eligible to sign the plan. And it just reaffirms in legal language the ability for everyone to participate and carry out the plan. The section 7 is the DSE assurances, and this is also the section where the DSE signs. So the list of DSE assurances is included in the state plan. This is also the same list of assurances that is included on the funding notices, and then reiterating that there's agreement for all of those assurances with the director of the DSE's signature. Section 8 is the SILC assurances and indicators. This lists all the assurance and indicators of minimum compliance that a SILC will agree to and agrees to follow. It also identifies the SILC chair, and the SILC chair is, of course, agreeing to those assurances and indicators. So it's kind of reestablishing, hey, this is what everyone's agreeing to do as a network. Section 9 is your signatures. So this is where the SILC chair agrees to sign on the content of the plan at the direction of the council. The SPILs are agreeing to the content of the plan, and it will show that at least at least 51% of the SPIL directors are signing that plan. And there is a chart that we've included in this presentation. It's really a handy chart where there are 3 different sections of the chart, or listed into columns. There's a DSE column, a SPIL column, and a SPILS column. And it goes into a little bit further detail about what the roles and responsibilities of each one of these entities are with regards to the IL network. So this is nice to be able to show, not only as a training opportunity for your own organizations, but to provide clarification through the process if need be. So really quick, we have all the resources linked for you here, including Rehab Act, your IL regulations, your state plan instructions and the instrument, and the SILC indicators in case you need those. So that's your handy dandy guide to those resources. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and stop sharing so we can have an open discussion about, now let's see,